Okay, anytime you're ready.
Okay, so we did wealth and poverty, and our main question is, what can we do to help close the socioeconomic gap of the future?
So obviously the socioeconomic gap has been a problem that's been around since civilization began. And one of the first instances is written in the Athenian Constitution by Aristotle, where he says the poorer classes, men, women, and children were serfs of the rich. They cultivated the lands of the rich. Because of this everlasting prevalence in society, obviously many solutions can be derived from the past, including debt forgiveness programs, which is currently found in the form of student loan forgiveness programs, can be originated back to Greek times when the elected official Solon gave out money to a rebellious populace. The second solution from the past is the redistribution of wealth, which comes from the Bolshevik Revolution, whereby wealth was obviously redistributed. This can now be found in the form of the welfare system. And the lack of monopolies is from government interference in these processes, which was brought about by public information due to The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. This brings us back to our main question of what we can do to help solve the problems of the socioeconomic gap in the future.
So our main solution was broken up into three main pieces. The first piece being that we should try our best to, whenever possible, support small businesses.
Please pardon this interruption.
Includes, instead of going to a
Attention,
grocery
middle
store, maybe
school
going
boys
to
basketball
something like
team.
a local
Please
farmer's
come to
market.
Mr.
Our
Diaz's
second
room.
part was to encourage
R2
equal pay for
for your
equal effort.
uniforms
This would
after
effectively
sixth
close the
period.
gender gap and
Again,
also
middle
it would
school boys
externalize
basketball
other
team, please report to room
identity
R2
factors such as
after
race,
sixth
ethnicity,
period.
and even religion. And our third main point would be to boycott ill practices, thus preventing companies from taking advantage of us.
Now, with these solutions comes pros. Our first pros is to increase participation of consumers. Now, what this means is if we have more control as to what happens in the market. Now, what gives us this power to do this is that we're able to boycott and encourage certain products, and this affects their sales. And then, so that is what gives us that power. Our next one is a more responsive, progressive business model. What this means basically is the amount of work you put in is the amount of equal pay. So equal work is equal pay. So there's nothing discriminating against race, ethnicity, gender, and stuff like that. And it makes it more equal pay and helps close the gap.
With pros, there are obviously cons. The first and most important one being hypersensitive economic stigma. This means that companies are going to have to conform to our new progressive business ideals, thereby increasing manufacturing costs, let's say by increasing worker wages, which will generally drive down the economic drive. Also, many useless niche markets will be created because with the support of small businesses, obviously there's going to have to be more markets to set up, and a lot of the products that they're going to provide for people are going to be considered useless because they aren't as appealing to a general populace.
Then we have limitations. Our first one is different scenarios / specificity. This comes with the idea that in each organization or business idea or business corporation has different controversial ideas and acts that are happening. So we can't blame one corporation the same way as we blame another and do that in other ways. Next, we have effective inhibition of sales. This comes from the idea that if we boycott big businesses such as Nike, which is a big contender in the shoe sales of our economy, and they raise a lot of money, they will start to lose money, which means our economy starts to lower. Then we have the idea of relative to time, where you can't expect these problems to be solved overnight or even over like a year. These things take years and even decades.
So then that leads me to the economic lens. So of course we must reconsider the fact that money literally means support. When we buy something, we're exchanging money for product. So what we're doing is we're effectively telling that business that whatever you're doing, we like it. We're kind of giving them a thumbs up, and we're perpetuating the cycle of their business model. And of course, not only do we exchange money, but we exchange information in what's known as a feedback cycle. Say instead of going to a grocery store, you went to something such as a farmer's market. Then you would be putting out the information out there that us as a population, we want a more local food production. This would then change the market completely. And also, when you demand different products, you're facilitating the production of those very same products. So it's almost like what you ask for is what will be given to you. However, in the real world, it's not always super effective or super important to try and buy from small businesses. Let's take car buying for an example. Since cars cost so much money, it's not very that cost effective to go to a small business and may either get ripped off or buy a faulty car. So it's better to just be safer with a dealership. And also if there's a small margin of error, such as medication, if you buy a cheaper medicine and say it doesn't do what it's supposed to, that could potentially be very dangerous, so you might want to watch out for that. And also integrated capability. And what I mean by this is when you buy from a product brand such as Apple or Samsung, which according to PC Mag, they make up 70.9% of all smartphone sales in the United States. You're also buying the capabilities that other platforms give them, such as the examples I have here, Apple Pay, Apple CarPlay, and Apple TV, which is something you cannot get from a third-party brand.
How can one's socioeconomic status affect their children? First off, we have false hope, which comes with wage discrepancies and the American dream. The idea of the American dream is stated in a research paper by Mara, Cohen Marks, and Christopher Stout. The American dream that we are all raised on is a simple but powerful one. If you work hard to play by the rules, you should be given a chance to go as far as your God-given ability will take you. This is not always seen in America today. With the idea of false hope, we see Rand and Catherine Conger, along with Monica Martin, said that the time 2000 and 2008 was an interesting one because within white family households, they saw a significant of $300, only $300 less in their median income than within African American and Hispanic families. They lost over $300,000 of their regular median income within that time span. And we also see this along with between men and women because the Congers, Catherine and Rand, also talked about how women only made around 70% of what a man made, even though they did the exact same job. So they also noticed that the men-headed household fared better than women-headed households.
Okay, so where you're born really affects what happens to you in specific. So if you're born in a more poor area, you're born at a disadvantage because you're born into poverty. Your parents don't have as much money in order to get you through school, through college and stuff, so you can't apply to the better schools, and you're more landlocked in the terms of you're stuck where you are, so you can't get into a better position. This is unfair, and this is due to the economic wage gap between these two classes of poor and rich, and this is really unfair to them. There's even worse conditions, such as being homeless and starving on the streets. And this is really unfair, as the rich are just living it up where they are, have enough money, whereas they're just trying to struggle to get through of where they are in situation-wise. Additionally, it also prevents revolts and boycotting, closing this gap. And this is because revolts happen because when people see something is unjust, it's unfair. And when something's unjust and unfair, such as a socioeconomic gap, then we try to fix it. But the thing is, if the economy is good and there's less of a gap and we have a middle class and it's more fair, then this allows us to not need to boycott as it works out.
So this graph that has been made by Visualizing Economics, which is an organization that gathers data and puts into a graph, shows the annual average income of the U.S. citizen. And as you can see, over the years, the average annual income goes up. But along with that, so does the price of normal items such as housing and furniture, etc. goes up. Now, what does this mean, and why does this matter so much? Well, past trends and future trends, and a trend such as this one, can help us predict future trends in the economy and stop events such as the Great Depression from occurring. So many trends have been seen in the United States, such as the graph that I just showed, and also this one. So a current trend is the decrease in the middle class, which was created by CNN, which they predicted that there's a decrease in the middle class. And also, this is because people cannot afford an education, and also if they do, there's a very high chance they do not graduate with their bachelor's degree. Also, Equitable Growth, yet another organization, created this graph which shows how employment rates have severely gotten down since the 2000s. And a past trend, which was written in 1940, which was talked about by Francesco Vito, an Italian chairman of an economy and sociology committee at the University of Milan, talks about how there was a gigantic boost in the economy after the Great Depression and how agriculture and small businesses severely helped out with this boost. Now, what predictions have been made? Well, predictions have been made by CNN that the middle class is vanishing over the years and that the definition to classify for the middle class is getting smaller and smaller throughout the years, such as what is up. For example, many people that have health and retirement security, classified for the middle class. And also employment rates have been going down severely over the years since the 2000s.
Okay. Rommel, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Dominick's findings.
Dominick's findings were basically the polar opposite of mine own, considering that he was the ethics lens and mine was economics, so he basically assigned a face to the problem that I was addressing, which made it a lot more personal in the fact that I only looked at facts and statistics and kind of removed this human factor from it. So in that, I would say that he really made it a lot more of a personal or intimate connection with the product that we were addressing.
Beatris, how did the group decide to include Ashton's perspective, lens, conclusions into the overall presentation?
Well, Ashton's lens heavily shows us the history of what we're talking about right now, and I think it heavily incorporates into my lens as well, because I'm talking about how in the future what can change, and I use past trends and past information from the economy, such as Ashton's research. So I think that heavily is incorporated into my work, and yeah.
Okay. Dominick, having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
A gap that I would say in our research is that it's kind of hard to implement our solution into society, and this is because it takes a lot of time to do this, such as boycotting, which would go on for months, and stuff such as equal pay has been stuff that we're trying to change for a really long time now in terms of gender, but this still hasn't been progressive completely. And along with cost, as boycotting can really jeopardize like a company's sales and products, and the employees working for it will have less money. So if we were to explore this more, I feel like we could come up with a little bit more better solution.
Okay. Thomas, describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
Well, one thing that we changed was we wanted to really focus on the epidemiological trends, but it didn't really tie in together with everything else, so we had to really take it out. And another thing that we decided on doing is adding our solution, limitation, pros and cons to the beginning of our presentation, so that if we do run out of time, we still are able to get those ideas in.
Okay. And Ashton, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem your group identified?
I would say that Beatris's information was definitely the most impactful, because mainly when we're trying to solve a problem like this, it's been around forever and it's going to continue being around. So attempting to solve it or lessen the damage from it, we need to be able to predict the future to accommodate the solution for the future rather than the now, because otherwise the solution won't really have that much of an impact as it is now, because things will be totally different in the future.
Okay. All right, thank you.